Of India and the Hindus. Of India, that other old and mysterious land to the east, the Romans knew much more than they did of China, and yet very little. Most ridiculous and fantastic tales were told and believed. Some reported that they were tiny wild men living in India, only 22 inches tall, who had no noses and carried on war with cranes and partridges. People without mouths who lived on the smell of meat, and others with ears so long they went to sleep in them. Don't believe all the accounts you hear about India, said Strabo, the geographer. Most of those who repeat them have not been to India, and what they tell you is from a hearsay. Many merchants from Egypt sail to India every year, but only a small number of them have ever gone as far as the Ganges River. From the report of the important citizen in Damascus, who also had been a friend of Herod's, Strabo had learned of the unusual delegation once sent by a powerful Rajah of India to Augustus Caesar and received by him on the island of Samos. Tiberius was no doubt reminded of these strange visitors as he now sailed from Rhodes to Samos to visit his stepson Gaius. The two grandsons, Gaius and Lucius, had been sent out by their grandfather Augustus to learn the business of the empire before they should be called upon it to rule. Lucius had been sent west to Gaul and Spain. Gaius had now come east to manage affairs in Armenia and the border of Parthia, just as Tiberius had done himself 20 years ago. It was that winter of 20 years ago when Augustus had spent on the island of Samos that extraordinary delegation from India had arrived with rare gifts and messages of friendship. Strabo, in telling the story, said the letter which the three Indian ambassadors had carried to Augustus Caesar plainly showed that more than 3 envoys had started out from India, but only 3 had survived. The rest, by reason of long journey, had died. One of the men in the party also later burned himself alive on a funeral at Athens. Not because he was unhappy, he explained, but because he wished to depart this life, lest something unto upward happen to him, if he tarried longer. Certain other facts about India seemed reliable enough to Strabo, who had never been there, to be repeated in geography. He said the people of the North India are like the Egyptians. Those in the south are more like the Ethiopians in color, although their hair does not curl. They are divided into 7 castes. One kind are Brahmans. They are philosophers who enjoy high repute. They attend the kings as counselors, as the Magi attend the Persian kings. They tarry in a grove in front of the city, lying on mattresses of straw and skins, abstaining from animal food and hearkening only to earnest words, and talking also with anyone who wishes to hear them. The hearer is forbidden to cough or even spit, and if he does, he is banished for that day as a man who has no control over himself. They converse more about death than anything else, for they believe that the life here is as if it were that of an unborn babe, and that death to those who have devoted themselves to philosophy is birth into the true life, that is, the happy life, and they therefore discipline themselves most of all to be ready for death. It would have been surprising to the Romans, no doubt, had they known that these brown-skinned people of India, whose customs seemed so foreign to them, as they themselves had come from the same early ancestors, both were descended from a race of white people known as Aryans, who had once lived somewhere on those wide, windy plains of Central Asia, across which the Silk Road now made its way. Long ago, about 2000 BC, when the Jews were pushing up out of the Arabian desert, these Aryans, for some unknown reason, had wandered away from their old home in Central Asia. Dividing, they had spread out like branches of a vine. The first group of branch turned south, crossed over the Hindu Kush mountains, and settled in the pleasant valley of the Indus River. Another group wandered west as far as Persia. Another went on into Greece. Another trailed down into Italy. Another to Spain, to France, and even across the waters to England. Conquering the more primitive natives, these Aryan people became the ancestors of almost all Europeans, as well as of the Persians and of the Hindus or of people of India. Wherever these Aryans went, they carried with them all the gods or spirits of nature which they had worshipped in their homeland. Greatest of these was the sky of heaven Father, called Danish Pitar in their language. In Greece, they pronounce it Zeus Pater. The Romans called it Jupiter. Also, wherever they went, these white men out of Central Asia found that the native inhabitants had gods of their own, which they often adopted. In the valley of the Indus, the newcomers soon began to wonder about these many gods, which had come first and how. And the world itself, the thinkers asked when and how had it been created. Who truly knows and who can declare it? The gods are later than the world's creation. Who knows then when it first came into being? He whose eye controls this world from the highest heaven, does he truly know it, or does he know it not? These questions came from the Rig Veda, a sacred book written in Sanskrit by those people in the Indus Valley around 1000 BC. It is the first and oldest sacred book or Bible used in the world today. About 200 years later, while the ordinary people were still content to worship and believe in many gods, which now numbered at least 33, the philosophers were not. Searching for the truth, they had come to believe that there was but one God, one great self or spirit of the universe. Their name for that self or spirit was not Antron or Java or Ahura Mazda, but Brahma. In sacred books called Brahmana, they describe the Brahma in this way. When people say sacrifice to this or to that god, each god is but a way in which Brahma is made known, for he is all gods in one. He is the one ruler of the universe, the self within all things. His form is not to be seen. No one beholds him with the eye. He is imagined in the heart. Greater than greatest, the smaller than small, the great self is always settled in the hearts of men. The wise who find him within themselves, to them belongs eternal happiness and eternal peace. So spoke the philosophers, but the ordinary people did not understand them. After centuries in the valley of the Indus, it became too crowded, and the Aryans or Hindus, as they were called, were obliged to move south into the hotter, moister valley of the Ganges. They found themselves among natives who were black and who worshipped strange animal-headed gods and hideous demons of the jungle. Fearful that they might become lost among these dark-skinned natives and their religion contaminated, the Brahmas or priests drew a color line or barrier of caste to keep the two races apart. It failed, for they intermarried, and the ordinary people who had never understood the idea of one God kept adding new gods to their list until they numbered more than 303 than 33. Also, sadly enough, the ugly caste system, which had failed to accomplish its purpose, was then used to divide the Hinduists themselves. Unscrupulous priests invented a myth about how people had been created to prove that the caste system of which they were taught was a sacred division. From the mouth of Brahma, they said, had sprung the highest caste, the Brahmins or priests, who spoke with understanding. From the chest of Brahma had come the strong and brave, the caste of Rajas and soldiers. From his thighs had come the third caste, the active farmers and tradesmen, and from his feet the lowly serf. To hold their power, they also loaded down their religion with endless laws and petty rites and regulations till there was no spirit left. Such a heartless, formal religion failed to satisfy the philosophers. But by that time, the hot, steamy climate of the Ganges Valley had also sapped their energy. How could one live in this world and be happy, they asked. There was no way to do it. Life itself was a burden from which there was no escape. Death alone would not set them free. They must be born again and again until they purified their soul. Only then, after death, might they be united with Brahma. Lost in the great self of the universe, as a drop of water is lost in the sea, they would at last find peace. To achieve this, to set the soul free from the body, they believed that they must control all evil feelings that came from the senses: anger, greed, abortion, ambition, pride, hate, even hunger and thirst. This led to most extreme practices. Many withdrew from normal life just to sit and meditate and practice self-control. They tried to feel nothing, not even joy or pleasure. Some starved and tortured their bodies. But the masses of people went on doing about all they had always done, worshiping one God or many, and erecting idols and shrines, obeying the priests, offering sacrifices, and bathing in the sacred gangs. There were, however, others who felt that things were not as they should be. About 500 BC, many reformers arose who tried to free India from customs and belief which they looked upon as both useless and false. One of these was a prince named Gautama, who had been born near Benares, the sacred city of India on the Ganges River. He gave up his wealth and position to seek a cure for the evils of the world. He led such a holy life that he was called Buddha, meaning the enlightened one. And after he was dead, his followers declared that he was the son of Brahma and told stories of his miraculous birth. Gautama, the Buddha, believed that bloody animal sacrifices were cruel and useless, that extreme torturing of the body was of no avail, and that the caste system was evil and false. He preached a way of life that seemed true to him. Though he gained followers for his teaching, and in time it was to become one of the greatest religions of the world, it was never generally accepted in India. India continued to be, and still is today, a land of many widely varying beliefs and practices. All kinds of religion exist side by side, for all kinds of people, from the most primitive and ignorant to the most intelligent and pure in heart. All these various beliefs and forms taken together make up the religion of Hinduism. In one of the later sacred books are to be found these words: "As one can ascend to the top of a house by means of a ladder or a bamboo or a staircase or a rope, so varied are the ways and means to approach God." Every religion in the world shows one of these ways.